Hi everyone, welcome to the next episode of RachReflects. For this week, I am so excited and honored to have, a good friend, a mentor, Bill Burnett, here with us today. Hi, Bill.
Hi, how are you? It's so good to be here.
I'm so good and I'm so happy. I'm so excited to be with you today. To those of us who've been following the RachReflects community for a while, you would know that Bill is no stranger. Last year, he very generously did a workshop virtually online for a lot of us on designing your life, right? So Bill is widely known for his best-selling book, Designing Your Life, which I also have it signed here, which really revolutionized the way we approach personal development by applying design principles to our lives. This innovative approach has also helped so many people around the world navigate career transitions, discover their passions, and also create lives that align with our purpose and values. So your follow-up book, Designing Your Work Life, further delves into the application of design thinking principles to be able to improve our work experiences and foster a sense of purpose in the professional realm. So, Bill, welcome again to the show. For those of us who are new to you, could you share with us a little bit about yourself and what you do and what you're so passionate about?
Sure. Well, the Designing Your Life class started back in 2007 when I got together with Dave Evans, the guy I write books with, and we were just trying to figure out how to help our students launch. Stanford students are smart, but they don't know anything. You know what I mean? They don't know about the world. And so we just put together a small class for that. And that really exploded. Now there's classes for freshmen and sophomores and seniors, and now even for the MBA students and graduate students. And Dave teaches in a program for people who are retiring called the Distinguished Career Institute at Stanford. People come back to Stanford for a gap year for grown-ups and try to figure out how to reboot. I was always a curious, kind of weird kid. I like to draw a lot, and I like to, I had lots of, drawing and fantasy worlds and things that I created. And then I was also interested in science and engineering and math. So when I got to Stanford, there's this really cool program called product design, which is engineering plus psychology plus art plus anthropology. It's really cool. It's really broad. So I found my people. I found my thing.
Your tribe.
My tribe. Yeah. And then when I graduated, my first job was designing Star Wars toys.
Amazing.
And I got to do the second movie and the third movie, and then I got to work on Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Wow.
And it's so crazy because the last Raiders movie is just coming out, and it was 41 years ago. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm so old. But then I got a chance to do startups, and I was at Apple for a bunch of years. But all along that time, I had been teaching because we like to have practitioners teach in our program. And then in 2006, after a bunch of part-time teaching experiences, David Kelly called me up. David's the guy who started IDEO. The big, international innovation consulting firm, and he was just starting the D School, our institute at Stanford. And he said, "Hey, you've been teaching a lot part-time. Would you ever thought about coming in full-time?" So in 2006, I took a full-time job as the executive director of the undergraduate and the graduate program. So I was running the programs I graduated from, which was really fun. And then and then we were making them better. We were really improving them and really kind of expanding them. And this idea of design thinking was just taking hold all around the world. And then, in 2007, Dave and I said, well, isn't your life, you're designing your life, like your future, isn't that like designing a new product? I mean, nobody knows what the new product's going to be, so we have to prototype. We have to start with empathy. Because I spend a lot of time teaching designers how to design things like iPhones and Macintoshes and websites and stuff. But it's the same principle, because when you're trying to invent something new, you can't use your typical engineering principles because you don't have any data, right? It's new. It's brand new. It's never been done before. When Dave and I wrote the first book, it came out in 2016, a lot of other universities called us and said, hey, this is cool. Can we do it? And we said, sure. And so we put together a program. We basically give the curriculum away to any school who wants it. And we've got about 350 universities now teaching the class all over the world. We now have the Designing Your Life Institute Limited of Singapore. It's a nonprofit registered. We launched it last week. It seems like the universe wants people to design their lives, and I'm just helping.
It's true. Yeah. And we're so grateful for the work that you and Dave do. I think for sure it has really trickled into Asia and this part of the world where I think a lot of us are also becoming a lot more intentional about creating the life that we want, and we're created in the first place to even live and do.
Absolutely. And I teach at a research university, so we track a lot of research, and the stuff in the book is all based on research. But one of the things is that particularly this generation is the most purpose-driven generation, and the generation that doesn't just, making money is great, but they don't want to just make money. They want to make some impact. And so my students, it's interesting. If I've been teaching for a while. So back in the 90s, early part of the 2000s, my students all wanted to do startups. They want to make money. And now my students are more like, no, I want to do impact. I want to do something in the social, social
giving back to
a social entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I want to create solutions for problems. I want to build organizations that are healthy. I think the Gen Zs and stuff get a little bit of a reputation of being, difficult to manage, or not like doing what they're supposed to do to just do the right thing. But that's not it at all. My students will work 100-hour weeks on something they're passionate or excited about, or that they believe in. But you got to be able to connect the job to something bigger than just money.
Yeah.
And for a lot of older managers and people who run companies, who've been on this treadmill of just money, success, they misunderstand, I think, the Gen Z's desire to have a meaningful life. But I think it's kind of part of our times. Look at all the issues we face. Climate change, the racial unrest in the U.S., we've got wars again in Europe. We've got failed states. We've got an energy crisis. We have a population crisis. If you're a young person today and you're smart and capable, you want to work on hard problems. You don't want to just get a job, regular old job and be a worker.
Yeah.
Now, when you're young and you don't have a family yet, it's more about your personal impact. But we work with a lot of folks who are, in their 30s and 40s, and families and houses and mortgages and all the other things that come along with it. Designing your life is really for any age.
Yeah.
We started out, particularly because I have a real soft spot in my heart for the young students who are graduating into the world right now and trying to find their way in a way that's meaningful.
I wanted to ask you also, having been someone who has seen, and also guided students through the different generations so far, what are some key trends or differences that you have seen besides the fact that today, what people are looking for is beyond just working for money?
Yeah. One fun part of my job is I get to work with 18 to 22-year-olds all the time, right?
Yeah.
They just keep coming. They seem to get younger and younger. I don't know why. I'm the same age. I feel like I'm the same age. But, when I started teaching in 1984, they were 18 to 22.
And
they're still 18 to 22. And I'm at least 41 years older, according to the Raiders of the Lost Ark book. So my grad students, have worked a little bit. They come back to grad school to get a master's degree in design. So they're 26, 27, 28. They are completely different than the 18-year-olds. Like the 18-year-olds, it's all TikTok and social media. It's TikTok and the latest stuff. And I'm always asking them, hey, what do you got? What do you got on your phone? Show me. And then I put it on my phone. And then I was Snapchatting with Evan.
One of Bill's students was Evan Spiegel, the founder of Snapchat.
Yeah. And when it first started, it was called Peekaboo. But anyway, so I get to stay young because I get to see what my students are using. And like the grad students don't know anything about TikTok.
Yeah.
And they're only 8, 6, 7 years older, So these things are happening so fast. But in terms of, general trends, there is the trend towards social entrepreneurship versus just making money. This is really probably the loneliest generation we've ever educated. This is the most anxious generation. The Surgeon General of the U.S., the head of the U.S. healthcare system, said last month that the number one healthcare problem in America is social media.
Wow.
Not diabetes, not heart
drugs.
attacks or anything else. It's social media, because it's creating this sort of place of loneliness and alienation, and constantly feeling like you're being compared to somebody else, and the negative impacts on young people, and particularly my students, are really significant. So this is the highest rate of depression and anxiety we've had on campus. In some cases, the highest rate of suicide. Luckily, we've been pretty good there, but just across the board at universities around the world. As much as social media can create connections between people, it also sometimes makes people feel lonely. Yeah. One of the principles of design is empathy and learning how to really understand you, but the dark side of that is really learning how to manipulate you, to keep you scrolling, to keep you moving, to keep you on the app. And so those apps monetize your attention. That's their goal. So their designers are really trying to make it addictive.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's really not healthy. I also teach the ethics module in our program. One of the case studies I use is that. Like you're a designer and social media, and you're trying to design this thing to be highly addictive, but you know that if people are highly addicted to this app that they're doom scrolling all the time, the things that the algorithms select are sensational and horrible and, whatever, controversial. So you know that you're having a negative impact on someone's mental health. Is that ethical?
Bill, so what is the worst and perhaps the most dangerous advice that you've heard?
Well, you and I were talking about this. There's two questions I really don't like that adults ask kids, or even, young as you're going off to college or whatever. The first one is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And although it's not a bad question, every question comes with a point of view, right? This point of view is when you grow up, you're done. Now you're a banker or a lawyer or something, and that's it. You don't have to worry about it anymore. But that's not how life works. And actually, that would be horrible if I rephrase the question. If growing up means you're no longer curious, you're no longer learning, you're no longer changing and you're growing into the person you want to become, then that's a dumb question. I never want to grow up is my answer. And I probably never did. I was always the kid who didn't pay attention in school, kind of, and I was always daydreaming or doodling or something. So that question, the reframe is, what do you want to be? What do you want to grow into, as your life unfolds? Because what I wanted to be at 18 isn't what I wanted to be at 30, which isn't what I wanted to be at 45 or 50, right? Yeah. And once you have children and kids, your life changes. So this whole idea of growing up being a fixed end point. I think it's destructive. The one that really I notice my students, or just young people struggling with, is someone will say, well, what you should do, Rachel, is you should follow your passion. And you're 18 or 19, and you go, well, I don't have a passion. I don't really have.
I don't know what
my passion is. Or I got lots of things I'm passionate about.
Exactly.
Which one should I pick? I care about climate change. I care about social justice. I care about women's issues. So we go back to research, and there's a wonderful researcher at Stanford, Bill Damon, and he wrote a book called Path to Purpose because he studied this. He studies adolescence. And in his research, and it's been other people have come to the same conclusion, about 20% of the people have a passion they can identify early in their lives that turns out to be, useful, and 80% of the people don't. So I hate a question, like get in line, okay, 8 out of 10 people, you don't have a passion, go stand over there.
Yeah.
When you have a passion, come back and I'll help you. It's like, well, that's horrible.
Yeah.
If 8 out of 10 people can't answer the question, but the question comes from an adult, so you think, well, I'm supposed to know the answer. You feel bad, and then feeling that sort of sets you back on your journey rather than helps you go forward. So look, Dave and I are all for living passionately, living into your life and designing it so that it's always new and different, and you discover your passion. There's other research, a guy named Cal Newport, and his thing was like passions emerge after you've gotten good at something, or passions emerge as you develop into the mature adult that you become, and you realize where your strengths are, where your goals become more clear. Even neuroscience, you don't form a full prefrontal cortex till your late 20s.
Yes.
Men much later. So don't marry any man under 30, by the way, because his prefrontal cortex is still not
underdeveloped.
Yeah, his ability to make good choices, not so good at under 30. So we know that we don't really build into our full adult self until our mid-30s. So asking an 18-year-old to follow their passion and making them feel like there's something wrong with them. The 20% of people who say they have a passion, that typically shows up in the arts. I'm passionate about singing. I'm passionate about dancing. I want to be a ballerina. I want to be a dancer. I want to be I'm an artist. I'm a designer. And we discourage those kids because we say, oh, well, that's not a real thing. That's not a real career.
You can't get a good living out of it.
Can't make a good living doing that. So even the kids who have a passion,
they get discouraged.
Feel like they're doing something wrong.
Wow.
And it's only the ones that can persist, or the ones that have wonderful, amazing parents who say, if that's what you want to do, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's go for it.
Bill, I also want to expand further on what you talked about. If following your passion is a bad advice and dangerous advice, which I completely agree with. I think discovering our passion is, for me, a lifelong project, right? It's a constant exploration, experiment.
Right.
Then what should the advice be for the young people today, or for just us as well?
Dave and I have been talking about this a lot because we're starting to think about maybe there's another book that's even bigger than designing your life. The advice of follow your passion, or what do you want to be when you grow up, or pick one thing and then you if you get to this thing, you've accomplished your life and you're successful. This is all what we call, it's kind of in the transactional. Do the right thing and you'll end up in the right place. But that's not the way life works. Life is a process. Like you say, it's a process. I want to grow into and find my passions. I want to be curious. Curiosity is a process. I'm curious about lots of things, and then people teach me lots of stuff, and then I find that's really interesting. Now I'm curious about these other things because as soon as I learn one thing, I'm curious about the next. With all of these questions, or any kind of an either or choice, work-life balance. You can have work or you can have life. What's the choice? Meaning or money? You can have meaning or money. All of these.
It's a binary.
All of these binaries, they're just not true. Life is a process. There's no work-life balance. It's just life. There's life at work and how you show up at work and what you learn and how you contribute. And there's life in your world with maybe your partner or family or your community. So learn to live in the process world where everything is unfolding, and get out of this transaction world where it's like win, lose, A, B, black, white. What I think we've been able to do in some of the books is just name this process, put a little framework around it, help people understand it.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people kind of feel this way, but they're not encouraged to think. They're encouraged to think, well, you'll be judged by how much money you make, or you'll be judged by how important your job is.
Yeah.
And then I meet these people in my workshops, and they're really sad and unhappy because there's no value in just money and status. All the research says that money and status will not make you happy.
Yeah.
Happiness comes from relationships. It comes inside out. It's not outside in.
Yes.
I don't care what other people tell me about my life.
Yeah.
If I don't feel it, then it doesn't matter.
I think what you're saying is also so relevant and related to, even books or articles like The 5 Regrets of the Dying, where the top regret is, I never got to live the life that I wanted. I've always lived the life that people expected or society expected of me.
You will never see in the top 5 things of,
The
regrets of dying, boy, I wish I'd made more money. David Brooks, who's the columnist in the New York Times, has a thing about eulogy virtues versus resume virtues. At your eulogy, after you die, when all your friends are standing there and saying nice things about you, don't you hope they say something like, well, Rachel was a kind person and she helped people and she really was dedicated to this idea of creating communities that were healthy and supportive? Or do you want people to say, yeah, Rachel made a lot of money and she was always on time for her meetings and her PowerPoint presentations were really good? Now, who wants that? That's a terrible eulogy. Yeah, Bill showed up on time and he did good PowerPoints. No, I want them to say I was a good father. I want them to say I was a friend. I want them to say, I was there when they needed me. So nobody ever says, in the 5 regrets, anything about status or real estate or money. Yeah. Or material possessions, or power. It makes me crazy is that somebody makes a lot of money and then all of a sudden we want to know what they think about everything. So Elon Musk makes a lot of money. Now we want to know what he thinks about politics. I think he may be smart about cars and rockets, but I don't know whether he knows anything about politics.
And I think, Bill, it's also really about reframing our minds and perspectives to what's really important at the end of the day. What is your definition of a successful life?
Most of the time people get stuck on problems and they don't realize you could just change the problem and then kind of unlock new solutions, new possibilities. So this idea of reframing. So you reframe from status to relationships.
Yeah.
You reframe from money to love. Then you got to do transactional things. You got to buy your groceries. You got to, go to school, get your grades. That's fine. But you reframe from transactional things to process things like being in flow or being in the field of love and generosity. Those are the things that will make a life meaningful. So Robert Waldinger just did a wonderful TED Talk on the Harvard study, which is this 95-year-long study. And they're going to continue it on now with the children and the grandchildren of the first people they studied. And they studied everything. Back in the 50s, they were sure it was IQ. IQ would predict success and longevity. No correlation. In the 70s and 80s, they thought it would be education and status, but no correlation to longevity. The thing that correlates to longevity, living a happy life, living a meaningful life, and actually living longer and being healthy longer, relationships. Who do you love? Who loves you? How is your family? What do you do for people other than yourself? What we're trying to do is get people to change their mindset from a mindset of scarcity, like I just gotta get all I can get for me because there's not enough.
There's always a winner and a loser.
The winner and loser. To the mindset of abundance. There's enough for everybody. All we have to do is participate. And there's always more than one way. There's always three or more. And if you start with the mindset of curiosity, you'll discover things that you didn't even know were there.
What is one key skill or characteristic that you think is ever so important, even more so now?
I think it's the growth mindset coupled with curiosity, and then tenacity or grit or something else. Like, don't give up on yourself.
Yeah, resilience.
It's not going to be easy. One of the reasons everybody does what they're supposed to do is that's the easy path. Go to school, get a good job,
Less
get a job at the
friction.
bank, get promoted 3 times, buy a nice car. It's like it's not hard. I mean, it's hard, but it's the obvious path. And when you step off of that path, you're taking a certain amount of risk. And it's going to be a little more bumpy, maybe, than the straight path. Although, I'm telling you, in the straight path, now with, companies restructuring and people getting laid off, I'm not sure the straight path is any riskier, less risky than your personal path. Yeah. Once you have a growth mindset and you ask questions about what's going on, it inevitably leads you to pick slightly different things as you go. And it only takes a small amount of, change in your course to end up, 20 years later in a really new place. For my students and certainly, and even for people in the mid-career workshops in their 30s and 40s who are thinking of pivoting, I go, don't you hope that 10 years from now you're doing something that you could never even imagined? Like, I'm doing something now I could never even imagined. And it's so much more interesting than the dumb ideas I had of what I thought was going to happen.
Or was stubborn to, hold on too tightly to.
Yeah, or to hold on too tightly. So one, there's the obvious path, and it seems like it's the less risky, but it's not really, because you might give up your soul. And that's pretty risky. And then there's the other path, which is more your path, right? The way that can be followed. That will be certainly more interesting. And it does require some self-introspection. I just did a program, HCLI, the group that we're partnering with, and there was a speaker before me, and he said that, and he's been a 20-year veteran at Microsoft, 20-year veteran at Autodesk, big business guy, but he wrote this book about his own personal journey. And someone asked him, well, what's the most important characteristic of a CEO? And he said, self-awareness. I think it's the most important characteristic of a human, because self-awareness. If you work on your own self-awareness, you realize your faults, you realize your strengths, but you see yourself as a whole human, right? And he said, for a CEO, self-awareness is the number one characteristic, because that's how the CEO grows and grows the organization.
One of the reasons, Bill, that you're such a huge inspiration to me is because you really live out what you teach and preach. I think at this stage of your life, for example, you could have easily, enjoy life in the sense of retire, enjoy time with your grandkids, but you still choose to constantly push boundaries, to constantly, whether is it your personal boundaries or professional boundaries, to see what else can you give to the world to make an impact. What keeps you going?
I mean, I'm at the age where I have some friends who are retiring, and I'm saying, what are you going to do? And they go, I don't know. It's like I can't even imagine. I learn so much, and I get so much joy out of being in a classroom, trying to teach people how to think about design and design amazing things, design, fantastic new computers or whatever. So that's a never-ending story, because now, I mean, when I started in design, we were still on drafting tables and making, parts. And now I can build something on a laptop, print it on a 3D printer, have it in a store in a day. So it's just the way the technology has advanced our ability to think and design. Now with these new AI engines and these language models, we can really accelerate human creativity. There's a guy who wrote a book, James Carse, called Finite and Infinite Games. And I'm playing the infinite game. The infinite game is the game you play, and when the game starts to end, you change the rules
Wow.
to keep the game going. And, an infinite game is love. An infinite game is learning.
Yeah.
An infinite game is curiosity. Because as soon as I learn about something, I change the rules and find something else to learn about. I do have a grandchild and a granddaughter on the way
Soon.
in the next month or so. Raising children was so much fun and so hard and tiring. And now grandchildren, that's a whole nother game, right, to play.
It's a different role.
It's a whole different role. So I love finding all these new roles. And even when I think I kind of got a handle on stuff's changing so fast now. People ask me, what's going to happen to designers with AI? I go, I don't know. I think designers will be the people who embrace it and use it to amplify human creativity. Because that's fundamentally what I'm doing, what we're trying to do at the Institute, and what Mark and I are trying to do is help people with their creative confidence, so that everybody feels like they have creativity they can draw on to make a better life.
And Bill, you have also throughout your career have built great products. What are some of the key principles that through the experience that you've had as a product designer that you think are so relevant to bring into helping someone else build their own lives?
I love designing physical things because then when you're done, you have a thing, right?
Yeah.
A lot of my students are doing digital design, which is great. It's another way of expressing yourself. But I remember I did a bunch of projects, but then when I went to Apple and I did my first project at Apple, and I ended up in the factory, and this thing we had designed, there was a production line that was as far as you could see. And then you walked into a warehouse and there were, boxes on pallets, hundreds of boxes on pallets of this product. And I thought, wow, my team did that. And millions of people are going to use that. And maybe it's going to make their job better or their whatever better. So I see students graduating from Designing Your Life classes. And they have confidence, and they have a plan, and they know how to prototype stuff, and they're thinking much more broadly than they used to be. They're not just, going down the default path that their parents wanted or they wanted or somebody told them they should do. Now, instead of walking into a factory and seeing, products, coming off a production line, I get to see people, which are more interesting, who have adopted a mindset that I think will help them in their life. So the mindsets are curiosity. And we talked about that already. Radical collaboration, because the answer is in the world with people. You got to be with people. That's where relationships are created. Reframing, that idea of don't get stuck on a problem, change the problem, right? Bias to action, because action is what gets the whole system going.
Bill, especially for yourself, when you're constantly recreating your path in your life, have you ever felt fearful?
Oh, yeah.
And what happens? What do you do?
I think fear is the number one thing that holds people back, right? They're afraid to be different or afraid it won't work. Well, I get nervous all the time when I have to talk or something, or when I have to do a class, it's just a
even after all these years.
Yeah, it's just a reaction. But I don't pay any attention to it, so it goes away. There have been times, particularly with this project in Singapore, where I thought, well, this isn't going to work, or it's going to be too hard, or people say they want to support us, but they don't. They're not really going to come through. But none of that's turned out to be true. So what I notice is that most of my fears, if I really take a look at them, if I have self-awareness, most of my fears are made up. And one technique a therapist taught me was, she said, well, all right, so I want you to sit down and in 10 minutes write down what's all the worst things that could happen. What's the worst thing that could happen on this project? What's the worst thing that could happen with this problem you're having? And really write down the most extreme, worst thing that you can do. And you write that list, and you write it all out, and you I think that the goal in that exercise is just exhaust all the possibilities. So you're not just, constantly thinking something bad's going to happen. All right, this could happen, this could happen. There's a lot of money. I could be embarrassed. I could hurt a lot of people who thought that was going to work and it didn't. So you write them all down, and then you look at it. And almost 100% of the time you go, well, first of all, that's not that bad. And second of all, that's not going to happen. And so that's been helpful for me to kind of calm my fears. I'm a big scaredy cat. I was the shy kid on the playground. I was the last kid to get picked for the team. I always fear that I'm not going to be accepted or something. But, I also know that was me when I was 9 or 10. That's not me now. I no longer describe myself as a shy person.
And what you shared really reminded me of, this exercise that Tim Ferriss says we all should do. It's besides goal setting, which a lot of us talk a lot about, but it's also fear setting where, like you said, writing down what are the worst things or scenarios that can happen.
I've heard him talk about that.
And I think that is absolutely useful as well. And before we end, Bill, I wanted to also ask you, what is perhaps an advice that you have for those of us who are looking to recreate or reinvent our lives? We may be stuck, we may be fearful, we know that we're settling, or we know that we've got so much more to give, but we just don't know where to start.
Right.
What is the advice that you have for us?
The way you start is pick something really simple. The whole theme in the second book is set the bar low. Everybody's trying to be amazing and everything else, and that's fine, but you get to amazing by starting out doing something really simple. If you look at the psychology of behavior change, if people want to lose weight or they want to get in shape or they want to run a marathon, if you try to do something too big, it won't work because, if you say, okay, it's January 1, I'm going to run a marathon this year, nothing you can do in the next 3 months looks anything like a marathon because you're not even doing 10,000 steps on your phone yet. So you got to break it down into simple things. It's good to have a goal, like I want to change the world, but how do I change the world? Well, first I got to change myself. Okay, well, how do I change myself? Well, all right, I'm going to start eating healthier. I'm going to do more. I'm going to walk more. I'm going to do something. So we know from the science of studying thousands and thousands of people and how they actually make change happen. Get rid of the negative triggers. Break it into small tasks. Reward yourself every time you complete something. Don't beat yourself up because you're only going to complete 80% of the tasks you set anyway, so don't beat yourself up. That's the statistic. If you do 6 or 7 out of 10, you're awesome. Our colleague at Stanford, B.J. Fogg, wrote a book called Tiny Habits. And I think there's another book that's out there called Atomic Habits, which are also
James
tiny.
Clear.
So, follow that advice because it's really good. It's really good research. During COVID, my wife and I we're pretty sedentary. We weren't doing anything. We thought this isn't good. We want to be mobile and vigorous when we get older. We hired a nutritional coach and a physical coach, and they all said the same thing. We're going to start really slow. And show me your phone. Bill, you're not even doing 4,000 steps. Let's see if we can get to 5. Let's see if we can get to 10. Let's see if we can get to 15.
Start small, set the bar low, celebrate the small win.
Do the Tim Ferriss exercise on your
Fear
fears.
setting.
Carl Jung, the psychologist, I think his biggest contribution to psychology was there's your personality and then there's your shadow side. There's always the negative. And until you integrate the negative and the positive together, you're not wholly a person. Wow. So accept your negative, accept your shadow. Everybody, you can't get rid of it.
This has been so great. Thank you so much for your generosity in sharing your wisdom as well. And thank you most importantly for the work that you do, especially now in our part of the world and in Singapore. We're so excited to see how we can learn more from you as well. So where can we find you on social media or on your website? Yeah,
so the website for the Institute is simple. It's designingyourlife.institute. In Singapore. The Stanford site where we run our lab and our research stuff is I think it's just called designingyourlife.stanford.edu or something like that. Mark and I are starting a TikTok channel, so we'll figure that out when we go. This is truly a growth mindset. Yeah, and then we'll be on social media a little bit, but don't do on social media too much. Make sure you keep a healthy brain. Yes, time box. Yeah, Bill, thank you so much. And I hope that you have enjoyed the episode as much as I did. I think even though I've had so many different conversations with Bill, there's always something that I always walk away with and take away with. So once again, we would love to hear what are some of your key takeaways. Comment below. And like, share, and subscribe. And stay tuned because, Bill and I, together with your Designing a Life Institute in Singapore, will be planning some workshops. Absolutely. Especially for the RachReflects community. So, till then, any last words for everyone? Well, first of all, you're so kind and you're always so nice to me. So thank you so much. The words are, everybody deserves to design a good life, a well-lived, joyful life. And it's not hard. It's just about take that first small step.